Psychiatry wasn't my first career choice. I actually went to Marist to become a weather anchor. And I graduated, I got myself a job as a morning weather anchor in Wyoming. Anyways, fast forward, here I am now representing as someone from the field of psychiatry. As a Muslim, as an avid reader of the Quran myself, suffering has been mentioned multiple times, numerous times in the Quran, and it's identified as tests for all of us who will be facing it in some way, shape, or form. And I think of a quote from Viktor Frankl, if you have known Viktor Frankl, who was a famous neurologist, a Holocaust survivor, and Viktor Frankl said something profound. He said that suffering ceases to become suffering the moment it finds meaning. And that's incredible because the idea of meaning and purpose serves an important part in our lives. At least that's the way I view it. And the meaning and purpose for me was found in relationships. So today I want to share with you a quick snapshot of my life where relationships served as the chief intervention. And for that, I bring you all the way to 1996. And at this point in my life, I was in Bangladesh. We were living in Dhaka, actually. Dhaka was the capital of Bangladesh. It's myself and my parents. We lived in a one-room apartment. My dad was working for a bank at that time. Our annual salary, family salary, was about $2,500 to $3,000, but that was enough for us to get the basic necessities, which is food on the table, clothing, and roof over your head. So we were content as a family, although the heat and humidity of Bangladesh is so brutal. I mean, we would have really appreciated an AC, thinking about it. But anyways, we were content with what we had. But the reason I bring you to 1996 is because 1996 was the time that my dad fell into profound depression and anxiety. And he was behaving in a very much, I would say, regressed, to an extent, childlike manner. And for me, I was about 13 years old. For me as a young teenager, that was scary to see, because here was my dad. He was the rock of the family, the primary breadwinner of the family, and for him to be this way, and in fact, he stopped going to work, so that was scarier. So thoughts that came into my mind, initially the first thought was, okay, so who will protect the family, because you view as your dad as the strong figure. So that was scary. Who will pay the bills, We were living in an apartment, we had to pay the rent and other financial obligations. So what happens at the end of the month when we're not able to pay, because dad is not going to work? So all those fears sort of started circulating in my mind. And at that point I was in a way resentful towards him. I was angry towards him. I was angry towards my life and how it's sort of panning out and like what's happening right here. And sort of I wanted to separate from the environment. And it was a one-room apartment, so you can't just go to another room and go on TV or watch a movie or get on the internet or whatever. Couldn't do that. You essentially it would be the same scene every morning. Would wake up in the morning. My mom would sort of beg and plead and cry to my dad and say, "Hey, can you please try today to go to work?" And you would see him sort of struggle. He was so confused at that time that he could barely even put his pants on. So, and there would be times where he would get dressed and we would all get hopeful, like, okay, today might be the day that he would step out the door, and sometimes he would, but he would come right back. So the only outlet I had was people watching out the window. So that was it. I mean, that's at least better than just seeing everything that's going on at home. The other thing that I did at that time was I forced myself to be a bit more social than I truly was as a young teenager. My school was put on hold at that time just because we couldn't afford tuition, because we had to pay school tuition. So couldn't see my friends, because that was an avenue for me to have the social outlet. So that piece was on hold at this time. So I made myself be more social and outgoing, and we had a mosque right across from our apartment. Literally, you would walk right across. And mosque is, not only a place of worship, but it was a place for the community members to sort of get together, form relationships, socialize, and so on. So here I was a young teenager, so I engaged myself in that environment because, again, that was better than being at home. It's a refreshing change, positivity, and also getting to meet and build new relationships. And the study that I'm going to refer to is from Roseto, Pennsylvania. So it's called the Roseto study, R-O-S-E-T-O. The people of Roseto had, at that time, in the 1950s that is, the rate of cardiovascular disease or heart disease amongst Roseto, Pennsylvania was substantially lower than the rest of the country. So there was a tremendous amount of intrigue that was built, like what is going on here? So they conducted this study, and they wondered, is it the water that they're drinking, is it their diet, or is it their genes? And the conclusion of the study was no, it was none of them. It was the fact that this community stayed together and stayed connected to each other. They would stop by and say hi to each other. Everybody knew each other. Everybody went to church with each other. All the community activities were done together. So it's the sense of relationship and community that kept them together, and that served as a great purpose and a way to improve their health well-being, and more specifically their cardiovascular condition. So coming back again, so the community aspect for me and being involved at the mosque was beneficial, because it was at that point at least helping me get by day in, day out. But otherwise, it was, like I said, it's pretty depressing. I don't see the situation at home changing a bit. Dad is still sick. Dad is not going to work. What am I doing right now? So that sort of dawns on you, and then you get somewhat depressed and sad about thinking, okay, you don't necessarily see a light at the end of the tunnel. Verse from the Quran that I think about is where God says that, surely we will be testing you with fear, hunger, loss of wealth, and people. But give glad tidings to those who build endurance. Build endurance through establishing salah. And salah is a worship form of prayer for Muslims. We perform it 5 times a day. And that is what I engaged myself with, performing my salahs, my 5-time salahs. But the one that was very special to me was the nighttime one, because that was a time my parents both were sleeping. And that for me was a time to express my emotions in a way, because I had a lot of, as I said, frustration, anger, sadness. So I would sort of engage myself in that meditation. I would cry, and I would be angry, but I would also vent. But that act of worship gave me tremendous bit of confidence, and I did feel that I was being heard. And it's an experience that only I can sort of be a part of, and I can't really explain to you in any way except if you have experienced it yourself. But I did feel after each one of those worship, especially at nighttime, I would walk away with some form of self-confidence that, for me, the one who made me will take care of me. Everything will be okay. It's not okay now, but it will be okay. Things will get better. By the end of the month, now we have our rent due for our apartment. Our landlord was willing to give us a break on the rent. He would take half of the rent. The reason for me that was truly a divine intervention is because we have known our landlord for years. And this man was brutal when it comes to acquiring his rent in full from everyone. And we have seen time in, time out that every time if one person is not able to pay the rent, you're out. There were plenty of other tenants willing to come right in. There's no reason whatsoever that I could figure out as to why he would be willing to give us that break. Of course, we told him, hey, look, we're not able to pay it this much. And he gave us that break, which was amazing. A few months later, a friend of my father stopped by to see check in and see how we were doing. And he didn't know that my father was, going through his mental illness, and he was suffering from that. But he was just checking in, and we haven't seen him for years, but he was just happening to stop by. But when he saw my dad at the state that he was, he served as a tremendous, I would say, a profound form of role model for my father, a mentor for my father, and get him out of that depression. Let's get going. Let's go out for a walk. And he was consistent with him, and day in, day out, I could see my dad turning a corner for better and making that improvement. A few years after this, and by the way, my dad started getting better, and that was sort of the catalyst, I would say. A few years after this, we received paperwork to be able to immigrate to the United States of America. And I got to tell you, that was for me a feeling, again, I cannot express to you in words, because it was such a joyous moment for me. Here I was, a few years back, I was worried about having a roof over our head, education, paying bills and whatnot. But now we have an opportunity to immigrate to the United States and start a new life from scratch. And we will have an opportunity. So that for me was also it seemed to me a personal miracle, a divine intervention. And so I go back and I credit, of course, my relationship with my community members, the relationship that helped me get by day in, day out, but at the same time, my relationship to a higher power that kept me looking towards the future and gave me hope and purpose. So these days, what I do is I work as a consultant and a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and my specialty is medication management. I also do therapy, and I'm also doing life coaching. But again, I'm thankful where I'm at today, but I think I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the relationships that I formed all throughout my life. So today, what I've been focusing on in my treatment, in my interaction with folks, is the power of relationships. Your relationship to each other and your relationship to a higher power, whatever that you believe in. But that essentially will keep you strong and will keep you going. I will quote you in a way, one of my mentors, and what he would say. So the way he would emphasize the value of relationship, and he would say that, look, if you look back at our ancestors, way back when they were hunting, they didn't survive by themselves. They had to stay interdependent to each other. That is what essentially that made them move on from generation to generation. So again, the power of relationships.